Hello again, everybody. It's another edition of Baseball Without Borders. Today, I'm rooted in Oakland. I'm Leif Skodnick, joined by my colleague Matthew Tallerini. I am actually I'm not in Oakland at the moment. I'm actually in San Francisco, California. Matt is back in New York, but I am out here for the 4 days of A's versus Rays, the best team in baseball versus the worst team in baseball. Two teams that might move, two teams that have taken opposite tacks in trying to build a franchise for as little money as possible, so to speak. One that's been very successful and one that hasn't. But first, we're going to talk about the 8 teams that are going to the College World Series that starts on Thursday in Omaha. I kind of lost track of what day it is, but Matt, you're going out to Omaha tomorrow. Take us through the Super Regionals and who you're excited to see out there at the College World Series.
I just feel like there's a lot of programs that either need to get off the hump of winning a national title, let alone for the first time in their program history. I mean, University of Tennessee last night, they put on a showcase as much offensively. And I think that, like a lot of these teams can, you can say like the Oral Roberts, right? Like who would have thought in the beginning of the college baseball season that one of the 8 teams out of a slight end of a mid-major conference would, be standing for the last, 12 to maybe 13 days at, Charles Schwab Field in Omaha. So I feel like it's really compelling to see the talent out there. I mean, even LSU's forefront of players that are finalists for the Golden Spikes Award. LSU center fielder Dylan Cruz, like he's batting over 400 during this time of the season, and I think that he will be projected at some slot rate that he is a first rounder. I mean, what are your thoughts, Life, on a guy like Dylan Cruz right now?
Yeah, I think Paul Skeens is the better player on LSU. I think he's probably going to be a top 5 pick, but I think Dylan Cruz is right there too. And, that gives LSU a tremendous 1-2 punch. To have a starter like him and then Dylan Cruz, who's just a terrific, terrific batter. Now, they are going to be in the tougher bracket, right? Because there are 5 teams that are ranked in the top 8 in the country that are in Omaha. But
Mhm.
in LSU's bracket, they have number 1 Wake Forest, number 5 LSU, number 8 Stanford, and unranked Tennessee. Tennessee got past a very, very good Southern Miss team in the Super Regional, and Tennessee has been in and out of the top 25 all season long. So, I don't think that LSU is going to have a potentially easy trip to the finals because they're going to have to bat against Rhett Lauder at least once, I would think. I couldn't see. I think for Wake Forest, I feel like they have to save Rhett Lauder for a game against an unranked team, or pardon me, against a ranked team. So I would, if I were coaching Wake Forest, I'd throw Lauder against LSU. I think Stanford is a dangerous team. They just beat Texas, not too far from where I am right now. I actually considered going to game 2 on Sunday night, but it was going to be a tough needle to thread to get from Oracle Park down to Stanford and then back to the hotel while I was jet lagged. So I didn't end up doing that. But I think Stanford has a very good team as well. But,
Mhm.
you know, LSU, if they can get past Wake Forest, I don't think anybody on the other side of the bracket could beat them except maybe Florida.
Yeah, I mean, it is anybody's deal, right? Like college baseball in all collegiate sports, March Madness. Yeah, it's a little, I mean, there is unpredictable stuff in March Madness and, slight, you know, certain confines, right, of the FBS and, even certain FCS following of through the course of all those programs, seasons. But honestly, like even TCU, they're not ranked, but they're a team I think that is still scary, as equal to the Wake Forests, the LSUs, the UVAs, and the Floridas that are still remaining. I
Yeah,
think,
and that was a team I wanted to
yeah,
bring up because you were down at the Big 12 tournament, and we've seen the amount of offense that TCU can put up. And then for sometimes coming randomly out of nowhere, like Trey Richardson's 11 RBI, 2 grand slam performance uh,
right.
not too long ago. I think that they're a team, if they can get pitching, they can easily come out of bracket one and be in the final in a couple weeks.
Yeah, for sure. And I think like that I'm seeing within the college landscape that like playing these games that they have earlier in the season at major league stadiums and yeah, like confining into playing that scene right at Globe Life Field, excuse me. That like you're down the street, you're in Fort Worth, Texas. Like it felt like an advantage for them that they wanted to just keep rolling with the momentum. And now they're going to get a huge turnout in Omaha. Like being there, every game TCU plays. I mean, all the other programs will get a huge turnout too. But I just think the TCU following is going to be like as predominant, like blending with LSU and Florida that are going to show up in Omaha this year.
Yeah, I mean, I think LSU travels well wherever they go. They have some rabid fans, as I saw when I covered college football about a decade ago. And Wake Forest has a good fan base. They came out in force in Durham at the ACC tournament, which I was at. Um, I don't know how many of them are going to go to Omaha. It's not an easy needle to thread to get to Omaha, Nebraska from Charlotte, from Winston Salem, but you can drive to Charlotte and get a direct flight, I think. Um, Stanford halfway across the country. I don't know how they're going to draw. Tennessee, Knoxville's kind of remote, so it's hard to say. But I think LSU is going to be there. I think TCU is going to be there, and I think Oral Roberts will draw a crowd too. I mean, Tulsa is not that far of a drive by the standards of the Deep South or the Midwest to
Well,
Omaha.
we're talking 9 hours.
Yeah, I mean, it sounds like a lot to us because we live in the Northeast. And to us, I don't like to drive 20 minutes if I can avoid it. But, out there where land is at a premium and nothing is close together, you get used to driving. I have cousins in the northern Midwest where my mother is from that don't bat an eyelash at driving 4 or 5 hours to go somewhere. So,
Yeah. And it's brutal too with the regional sites, the super regional site, like Hattiesburg. I mean, can you imagine if having a rain out? Yeah, it is a turf field in their new facilities that they upgraded a few years ago. But, in some regard, I mean, like, you just can't live like as far to where you got to go, especially teams that need to go out there. I feel like it's just a different deal, honestly. Like with Tennessee, if their game from last night wasn't going to get played. So, but now we have the final eight. We have the final eight teams now that are left in Omaha for the 2023 NCAA Division One season.
and you were out there last year. What are you most excited about seeing again in Omaha?
I like the fan fest stuff that they do outside of the left center field area, Charles Schwab. So I recommend, honestly, if certain listeners are listening, and that have never been to Omaha, once we post this later on today, I think it's really cherished to go look at Rosenblatt Stadium where it once stood. It's actually right by the Omaha Zoo. And I mean, it's kind of fascinating. They built like a little T-ball park life or like a miniature like Miracle League deal, but it's cool. It's neat, like they have like a stampede of like old seats that they kind of commemorated and stuff. And I thought that was really neat. And yeah, like I said before, they have like a lot NCAA. So if you've been to a March Madness, you've been to an FBS national title game for football. A lot of stuff NCAA does, they do like fan fest venue stuff. So they either put like a little concert street type of deal out, or they have like certain contests that you would like shoot around, or it's pretty neat. It's a pretty, or batting cage, or throwing off a pitcher's mound. So they got like a little kid zone area, whatever you call it. So that's neat. And then if you follow a lot of the new like certain baseball merch companies that are kind of taking their own, own deal. They have like a baseball commemorative like memorabilia of shops of other companies that are like right outside the stadium. So I think that's a neat deal. When you go to Omaha, you can get stuff right outside the stadium. And I kind of told Life off air that it's kind of like Cooperstown, Main Street. If you've been to, the Hall of Fame and you go to like the Shoeless Joe Jackson store and like other, I know Shoeless Joe Jackson has a store right on Main Street, but he's not an
I
Hall
don't
of
think that's
Fame.
actually his store. His store
It's
was a
not.
liquor store in Greenville, South Carolina after he was
Yeah,
done with
yeah, but it's
baseball.
just
But
the name. Yeah, it's
yeah.
just the name of like commemorating him. But
No,
like,
I've been there before. In fact, I think I bought a when I was 10 or 11. I saved up a bunch of money and I bought a an unopened pack of 1951 Topps Redbacks in there. Can't remember who I got. I think it was Gus Zernial, but pretty neat.
interesting. Yeah, so like that's like the baseball haven of like Omaha, if you want a resemblance that. And I think, life's gonna be there the last 4 days. I'm gonna fly out tomorrow, like we said earlier in the podcast, and the press conferences and batting practice, field time stuff is gonna be on Thursday too for all the 8 programs. And yeah, it's going to be neat. I know, like, this is your first time going to Omaha. I mean, what would you like to see out of a fan, circuit, or just let alone the coverage that what we're going to be, writing about down there?
I mean, I'm just looking forward to the atmosphere personally. One of the things that I really enjoyed, um, years ago, when I was in law school, I did a lot of freelance radio work for ESPN and a bunch of other networks, and I got to cover a lot of college football games. Basically, every weekend in the fall, I was somewhere in the SEC, either Baton Rouge, Oxford, Starkville, Tuscaloosa, Auburn. You know, and the atmosphere around big time college sports is very special. Now, I don't hold any illusions about college sports. I think that the only business dirtier than college sports in the sports business is horse racing, um, especially college basketball. But that said, the pride and the passion that fans have for their colleges, especially down south when it comes to football, is incredible. And with a lot of friends that went to Ole Miss or are Ole Miss fans or went to Mississippi State and are Mississippi State fans over the past 2 years, I've seen so many posts about Omaha and what it means to fans from all these schools, especially Ole Miss. I mean, I count myself as a fan of Ole Miss because of some friends that are big donors there, and I've gone to a lot of games there with them. But you know, the joke about Ole Miss for a long time was that Omaha was an acronym that stands for Ole Miss ain't here again, and to see those fans and the passion that they had get rewarded, and so many of them to make a trip from
Yeah.
Jackson, Mississippi to Omaha, and then to get to see their team win, I think was terrific. So, that's mainly what I'm looking forward to seeing. I'm not going to be there for all 8 teams. I'm only going to get to see 2 of them. But I'm hoping for a good 3-game series with a great atmosphere and some fun baseball to watch and write about.
Right. And I mean, like, college, you'll have that. Like, and it's another angle. You'll have like the programs that they kind of like are the lovable losers, or they couldn't get the monkey off their back. And yeah, regardless if you don't make it to the tournament the following year, like Ole Miss didn't make it to the field this year, so with the season they had, but it's still a reminder that it's anybody's deal. I mean, I'm going to be honest with the coverage we've been seeing. I'm not going to be surprised that Oral Roberts wins the whole thing. I just think, you know, college baseball has a different, um, upskate, and with all the upscale deal, with all the, coaching changes that happen, the carousel changes, I think, Wes Johnson, I mean, what he's going to be doing for the University of Georgia Bulldogs, I think that's going to be key to have major league experience. And I even saw news the other day that University of Central Florida might talk to Joe Girardi, but that's a little bit of a holdup. We'll see with crossover managers going from the major leagues to Division One baseball programs in the NCAA. I think
That'd be an
that
interesting
alignment.
hire. And we just saw former major league pitching coach get hired at Georgia.
Yeah, Wes Johnson. Yeah, exactly. Yeah. So, I mean, yeah, like I think there's a different, microscopic end to this. That does Bianco belong in a major league dugout? It's kind of, I think, that radar of college sports that we're in now more than ever, and I just think we're gonna see, head coaches cross over to Major League Baseball, especially with all the analytics now. I think it's going to be so similar, all the research that we have to see a lot of coaches transfer from the collegiate game to the pro alignment here in the United States.
I
So
mean, I think yes and no. I think certainly a major league coach, like if you put Joe Girardi in the UCF dugout, he's going to be fine when it comes to baseball strategy. Where he's going to struggle is with recruiting because he hasn't done that. Recruiting as a college coach is primarily about sales and convincing people that you want their son should spend the next 4 years of his life and possibly the biggest 4 years of his baseball career to that point
an
with
advocate.
you.
Mhm.
And
Yeah.
to that end, he hasn't had to do that because he has Brian Cashman to get him players when he's manager of the Yankees, or in the major
He
leagues you
used
have a
to
GM
be.
that does all that. Now that said, going the other way, I don't know how well like a Mike Bianco would translate going, like if Bianco went from Ole Miss to next year he's managing the Oakland A's. I don't know how well that would go. I have friends who played for him, and I know he's a very knowledgeable guy, and obviously he's won a national championship at the Division One level. But professional baseball is a daily grind on a level that very few people that have not worked in it can understand.
It's a leap.
Um,
Yeah, it's a leap. Yeah, like you even said to me before off air that I feel like double A and some compartments of Power 5 conference division 1 level a lot they're similar, but then the pitching, that there's a gap. Like
yeah,
between like that element between Power 5 Division 1 NCAA baseball and certain guys. There's been like over 23,000 people in the history of Major League Baseball that have stepped onto a major league field.
yep,
So think about how many players have made it to double A, and the long end of a short career or injuries or any other of life elements happen. So I mean, it's just what we're going to see in Omaha life. I think it's going to be a make a change for student athletes. Honestly, this is outside of sports. You're a national title champion, for life, even if you don't step onto a major league field. I mean, so compelling to the student athletes, and I mean, World Baseball Network's grateful for another second year of
yeah. I
coverage.
mean, to that end, what was it that Glenn Sather said to the Edmonton Oilers in the 1980s? They're a game away from winning the Stanley Cup, and I think he told them something like, "Boys, we win tonight. Teammates may come and go, but champions walk together forever." You know, it means something. It means a lot. It means a little more to win in
Exactly.
Omaha.
Yeah, and life. You're out in Oakland. I mean, what's the buzz like
So yeah,
right
so I
now?
flew out here Sunday morning, and I went to Oracle Park. I caught the Giants and the Cubs. Jock Peterson had 2 home runs, including the 101st ball to splash down in McCovey Cove. Tyro Estrada had 2 runs, 2 home runs in the 13-3 win. Um, and, it was meaningful to me to get to Oracle Park. My dad grew up a Giants fan in New York City since about 1949 when his first cousin, Mike, turned him into a Giants fan, and he's still a Giants fan to this day. He has not been to a Giants home game since the Giants played at the Polo Grounds. So, I wish he could have been there with me because it was tremendously meaningful to me to be there at what is honestly one of the best ballparks I've ever seen in my life. You know, it's beautiful. It's right on the water. McCovey Cove is there. The weather was perfect. It was 65 degrees. There was a little breeze. Um, Everybody's having a good time. The concessions are great. You can read my full ballpark review on worldbaseball.com. But so that was Sunday, and that was just kind of a leisurely day for me. Caught that game after the flight out here, which was about 6 hours. Left JFK at 6:30 a.m. and arrived in at SFO at like 9:15 in the morning Pacific time. And then yesterday the Oakland A's have won 6 games in a row. In the last 6 days, Oakland has won a third of the games they've won this season. They're 18-50. They beat the Rays last night 4-3. And there were 4,855 people there last night. It was not well attended, and I don't blame A's fans for staying away. The A's and John Fisher and Dave Cavill, the team president, are doing absolutely nothing to put a competitive team on the field. And part of that is, there was a sign in the right field bleachers last night that said empty seats by design. And that's absolutely right. What the A's organization is doing, in my opinion, is just rerunning the same playbook that Jeffrey Loria and then subsequently Major League Baseball ran in Montreal to get that franchise out of there and into a big new stadium in Washington. And honestly, I I went to a lot of games in Montreal the last 4 or 5 years that the Expos played there, 4, 5, 6 years, I guess. And the fans deserve better. The city has ponied up a lot of money on the Howard Terminal site. They couldn't get the deal done. And meanwhile, the A's, it would seem, were at the same time negotiating with Las Vegas somewhat secretly, and then signed a deal that has since fallen through to build one ballpark, and now they're working on another deal to build a ballpark on the site of the Tropicana Hotel and Casino on the Las Vegas Strip. That the sticking point is whether or not they're going to get $395 million in state funding from Nevada to build this ballpark. And, I don't blame the owners that much. I blame the owners for what they're doing to the fans in terms of putting a team that honestly might not be a 500 team if they played in the International League on the field and calling it Major League Baseball. I think that's kind of embarrassing. But the baseball is a business, and you want the team to be profitable. Now, not every major league team is profitable. The New York Mets have a $360 million payroll, and Steve Cohen said flat out that he lost money on the Mets last year. And that doesn't surprise me when he's spending that much money on player personnel. Now, for the A's, they are not going to make money drawing 4,800 people a night. We know this. Their average attendance is about 9,000 a night. But there were fewer than the announced attendance there last night. But tonight is the night of the reverse boycott. And A's fans are coming out in force to tell John Fisher and the A's organization that we're not the problem, you're the problem. And I'm excited to see how many people come out here tonight to the Coliseum because I think there's a lot of history at the Oakland Coliseum that people forget about. They want to, you know, it's a dated old building. It's an anachronism. It's a concrete donut. It's all those things. Mount Davis is an awful eyesore in the outfield. Um, all those things are true, but there's also a lot of history there. You know, Willie Mays played his final game there in the 1973 World Series. Reggie Jackson and the A's won 3 consecutive World Series in 72, 73, 74. Catfish Hunter pitched a no hitter. Ricky Henderson broke the record for stolen bases there.
Yeah, MC Hammer.
MC
MC
Hammer was a
was a
bat
bat
boy. I
boy.
mean,
Yeah.
so many of these things, the A's reinvented how we think about baseball playing at the Coliseum under Billy Beane. And look, the A's have been trying to do more with less for a while, and but they've been in Oakland since 1968. And when I think about a team's tie to a place, you know, in the show Ted Lasso, there's a scene where Ted Lasso, the coach who's from Kansas, and he was an American football coach, and he goes over to England to coach an EPL team. Um, Decides he's going to let fans come in and watch practice, and he says, why shouldn't we? It's their team. We're just borrowing it for a while. And so, yeah, I mean, John Fisher owns the A's, sure, but the fans have a little bit of a stake in it too, and to disregard them in the way that John Fisher has, I think, is criminal. Or if it's not criminal, it's certainly not a good way to do business in a community that John Fisher grew up in. He is a native of the Bay Area, and you know, if he wants to flip the team, if he wanted to buy the place for cheap and flip it because that's how you make money on a major league team. I don't begrudge him for that because really the way to make money owning a major league team is to flip it for more money as it appreciates in value. Because as we've seen, major league sports franchises don't really lose value; they gain value over time, even though they tend to lose money
Mhm.
year over year. But it would be a shame to see the team leave Oakland, a city where they have played for so many years now, and it's especially cruel, I think, for the franchise to put up signs on the Coliseum that say "rooted in Oakland" while they are simultaneously negotiating with Las Vegas.
Yeah, I mean, like, it's just, like a slogan that you've used since 1968, right? Like rooting in Oakland. And I think of the when I think of the Oakland A's, I always think of like the white cleats, right? They brought a different, style to baseball. And I felt like, when I was a kid watching like This Week in Baseball and every Saturday before the 1 o'clock games on Fox, I would see like, Raleigh Fingers, Catfish Hunter. I mean, like endless legends. I mean, wearing just the funkiest outfits, at the time were in style. I mean, like, let alone, like, I've always thought the A's had such unique uniforms than like the San Diego Padres, and I guess you could say the Pittsburgh Pirates. Honestly, those are like the three top funkiest uniforms out of that era. And yeah, I mean, like it's gonna be definitely interesting to see what happens tonight. I feel like that Oakland, you can't lose two franchises. You can't, at least the Warriors are in San Fran. They're still close. You still lost them. But they're not as far. But, you know, when the Raiders took a hit a few years ago going to Vegas, I think is that the wake up call to see fans, really, just what they love in the A's? I mean, and let alone what the A's were as an identity of a franchise in the '70s. I think it's huge that if a deal could strike them not leaving Oakland life, I I just think that they're bound to get a stadium Howard Terminal. But like we don't know how many chances are certain layouts of other sites are going to happen, and what happens to their AAA team in Vegas.
Yeah, I mean, as I wrote this morning, there have been no less than six different locations that have been proposed for an A's ballpark, from San Jose to Oakland to different places in Oakland in the East Bay area. And you know, yeah, exactly. How many chances do you get? And I don't blame the city of Oakland for pushing back, and I don't blame Las Vegas for pushing back either and saying we're not giving a billionaire public money for a business, right?
Mhm.
Because Nevada and every other state has trouble funding the public services that we as a society have all agreed that we should have, like public schools and fire protection and police and you name it. But at some point, you have to draw the line. And I think that Fisher and the A's should stay in Oakland. I think it would be tragic for the A's to leave Oakland. And not only that, you mentioned two teams leaving Oakland and the Warriors going across the bay. It's really four teams at the Coliseum complex that have either left Oakland or folded, because you're forgetting that the Raiders have now left twice. They went
Yeah.
to LA, they came back, then they went to Las Vegas. The Warriors went to San Francisco, which, yes, it's very close, but it's a different city with a different character.
Yeah.
And then the NHL's California Seals were in Oakland for a hot like 8 seasons before they folded. So, Oakland could be the first city to have had four major league teams playing in the same complex and have all of them end up leaving the city.
That I think it's just miraculous to think that. I mean, I never would have thought.
Miraculous or tragic?
Well, I mean, like in catastrophe, like it's just like four teams, like four in all different major pro sports leagues. I just think it's I don't think it's bound to happen for Oakland, but I wouldn't be shocked if the move to Vegas does happen. And I mean, the turnout tonight life is probably going to be as interesting of when you saw the Expos as a kid pretty much leave Montreal, and we're playing certain games in Puerto Rico for like the last few seasons as the Montreal Expos franchise. So I feel like there's a crossover to like how tonight's going to be, if that makes sense, or what lies ahead for the next few months. I
Yeah,
mean,
I mean, when the Expos were on their way out of town, they'd still draw for opening night, and then most of the rest of the year, you could get in for $5 Canadian, and there'd be a couple thousand people there. But there were a couple of years where the team was pretty competitive when they had Vladimir Guerrero and Brad Wilkerson and Orlando Cabrera and Jose Vidro and Javier Vasquez, and a lot of good young players under Omar Minaya. But in September, and I believe the year I'm thinking of is 2002, but it may have been 2003. The Expos were only a couple of games out of a playoff spot in the final week of August. And back then, the major league roster could be expanded to 40 guys. So, you could get some guys some playing time at the major league level. You could give some of your important players a rest to get ready for the playoffs. You'd have more bodies available for the playoff run. And for whatever reason, Major League Baseball would not let the Expos spend the money to call up those 15 players to the major leagues. And suffice to say, they were not competitive down the stretch in the month of September. And 2 years later, they were off to Washington. And the last Expos game in their history was played at Shea Stadium, where they played their first game, and I was there. And you know, that's baseball. Baseball's a business. As much as we love it, it is a business, and sometimes the business makes it even more heartbreaking than the game on the field.
Yeah, no, for sure. And yeah, I think, like what we're seeing now this month too, like speaking of a business and everything else, is that we're gonna see kids, not even kids, they're actually young men that are gonna probably be faced with a lot of slot money out of, the MLB draft that's coming up during the All-Star break. I think, like back to like everything that we've been covering the last few weeks with the NCAA Division 1 tournament also, and now what lies ahead in the College World Series. I think, yeah, this is big. I think this is big where baseball is going as a business, having the MLB draft on the same course of the calendar year as the All-Star game is, the same time frame. I think that this is more of a different scope than like when I was used to seeing kids like hit a home run after